So, welcome to our session on master's applications. Here's the quick outline for today. We'll start by taking you through some of the basic parts of the master's application, including how do you choose your course, how do you choose your university, what are the eligibility requirements, and then we'll take you through the application overview discipline-wise. So we have STEM, we have humanities, we have social sciences, and we have interdisciplinary programs as well. Just to quickly recap, as you all know, Project Edu Access aims to make the higher education and scholarship landscape more inclusive, and we do so by four key interventions, which include mentoring, counseling, role modeling, information advice and guidance, capacity building and leadership, and evidence-based advocacy. This particular workshop is part of the series under Pakistan Graduate Mentorship Program, which is brought to you by the in collaboration with the Oxford Pakistan program, which is also a first of its kind initiative that aims to increase the representation and research of Pakistani scholars at the University of Oxford and in the UK higher education more generally. So as mentioned, this is the second workshop in our 10-part workshop series. You can see the calendar here. And today we'll be discussing master's application specifically. So for that, we have four very distinguished panelists with us today. We have Saira, Hamza, Sana, and Ayesha. You can see their details on screen. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today. Between the four of them, given their diversity of experience, I'm sure they'll cover all the questions that you have in their presentation, but we also have a Q&A session if you have any more questions from our wonderful panelists today. So with that, let's start our presentation. Saira, I just wanted to check if you have joined. Okay, so I think Misbah will take us through these slides today. Misbah, thank you so much for taking over and
Yes, thank you so much, Wajeeha. Hi everyone, I'm Misbah. I am currently doing a PhD in law at University of Oxford, but I also did my master's in women and gender studies at University of Oxford. And I'll just take you through some of the basic information about about master's degrees. So firstly, what are the different types of master's degrees? I think from our home country, we generally think of master's as a simple MSc. If we've done an undergraduate in political science, and we assume that, we'll do a master's in political science, which has a similar structure of an undergraduate degree, but usually in universities abroad, there is a wide range of master's degrees. So firstly, there's a taught master's, which is a very common master's, especially in the UK. It consists of lectures, seminars, and sometimes it has a dissertation component as well, but the dissertation is generally a short dissertation. And these can be more generalized, which broadens the scope of knowledge in that field. And usually they refer to as either an MA, MSc, MST, depending on, again, what you pick up as skills through the degree. The second are research masters. So these are master's degrees which don't really have a taught component, but emphasize on independent research. So you will be required to undertake a substantial research project or write a dissertation on a topic that you express in your application when you're applying for a research master's. And it may have some taught component, and usually the taught component is on, say, research methodology that helps you write that dissertation. So for example, an MRes, Master of Research, is a common research master's degree, and MPhil is a common research master's. So in the UK especially, a lot of the courses that are referred to as an MPhil are actually master's courses rather than a step after master's and before the PhD. It's not an intermediary course, but it rather is seen as a master's degree itself, and it's usually helpful to do a research master's if you want to do a PhD and you want to develop some research skills, and if you want to write a research project in a shorter duration, which will then develop into a PhD. So masters can be either general in scope or have a specialized field. So for example, you can either do a very generalized LLM program where you can select your modules at universities abroad, or you can do a specific master's program, for example, the master's in corporate law, which is available, which is offered at Cambridge. So you can have a generalized LLM that you choose to do, or you can do a specific MCL, and that's similar for different masters and different disciplines and fields as well. Then there are professional master's degrees that are designed for professions or industries, for example, the MBA or the MPA, which is the Master's in Public Administration, or the MPP, which is the Master in Public Policy, are sometimes seen as a more professional degrees that prepare you to join an industry. And then there are also master's programs that are more integrated in nature. So you do a master's, and it's integrated with a PhD program, and usually they last longer. So, for example, at Oxford, there's an MPhil PhD integrated course in economics where you do the MPhil, which is actually a master's that is a pathway to the PhD. So these are the different types of master's degree that you should be thinking of before you decide which one to do. What are some of the key considerations on deciding which masters you want to pick? So first is the duration. Depending on the country, depending on the course, a master's degree ranges from either 9 months, which is very common in the UK, and in Europe, I think, as well. And there are 2 years masters as well, which is common in the US. So think about how long you want to do your masters, and then that will determine which masters you want to do. Second, and very, very importantly, think about the taught modules. So if you're doing a taught research, see what are the optionals that they're offering that you want to pick, if they align with the research you intend to do, or the skills you want to pick up. What is the scope for independent research? Is there a research component or not? So, for example, um, the BCL, which is the LLM program at Oxford, does not have a research component at all. And so it may not prepare you for a PhD as opposed to some other LLM program in another university that has a dissertation component and may prepare you better for an LLM, or for a PhD, or even if you don't want to do a PhD, but you want to do research, it might be good to see whether that is something that the course structure allows. Then assessment, see what is the nature of the assessment. You can have coursework that involves writing essays, you may have written exams, you may have dissertation, you may have a combination. So you can see how are you being assessed and what works for you. Then career goals, again, it is like all of this information is usually available on the course website. I should have clarified this. So your research begins on the university website of the course and sort of ends there as well, because these are very comprehensive. The university website try to include as much information as possible, at least in information needed to determine whether that's the masters you want to choose or not. The other consideration is career goals. So whether doing that master's will help you go into an academic career, or if you want to do an industry job, does that master's equip you or give you the necessary skills to get a job in the industry? Then funding. There are some scholarships that are not available for research degrees. So research masters will not there are scholarships that you won't be able to apply for, whereas taught masters tend to have more scholarships. So, for example, Chevening Commonwealth support only 1 year taught master's programs, and not, say, an MRes or an MPhil, which for that you may have to apply or look for other sources of funding. And these can be internal funding options like offered by the university. Um, and then finally, if you want to do a PhD, it's very important that you see whether that degree prepares you for a PhD. So if there's coursework on research methodology, if it's giving you the necessary training to apply for a PhD or get into a good PhD program. Next slide. Okay, so what are the steps to choose, or rather, how do you find that information? Identify the sort of universities you wish to apply to. So if you have a list, then go to their university website or their postgraduate admissions website. See the list of courses that are available and that align best with your interest and goals. So as you can see, there are screenshots of 2 pages from Oxford's postgraduate sort of admissions pages. Check if you're eligible to pursue the course. So sometimes courses may have specific eligibility requirements. So for example, if you want to do a master's in, say, economics, it may be that you need to have either an economics background or a math background. I mean, this is not necessarily true, but there are some courses that will require you to have some basic training, or some may even require you to take some standardized tests. So, for example, the Masters in Economics for Development at Oxford necessarily requires you to take the GRE. So you'll have to think of those things as well, whether what are the application requirements, and if you are willing to undertake those tests. Then funding options, again, university websites tend to give all the information required on what are the various sources of funding available. So these may be internal and external sources as well. And then, of course, in the process, if you are able to connect with people who have either studied here or professors who might know about the courses, it's good to have a chat with them as well. Next slide. So general eligibility requirements, these are just again, specific courses may have specific requirements, but more or less this is what master's degrees require from you. So there's an academic requirement. So one is that there's a minimum set grade that you need to have from your undergraduate degree. And it again varies from course to course. So for example, sometimes you'll see on university websites, it'll say a minimum of an upper second class honors in your respective discipline, which basically means that you need to have, so in your undergraduate degree, you need to have a minimum of an upper second class honors. And that again is going to get evaluated as per how, your university grades and how your university marks students. Then completion or release from any current training or education, which means essentially that if you are going to start your studies in September 2025, you should have completed your undergraduate degree or master's degree, whatever it is that you're doing, but you should not be enrolled in any other university or program. So some master's program require previous training or education, as I said. So if you want to do a master's in law, it's usually required that you should have done an undergraduate degree in law as well. And I'm sure that's true for a lot of STEM courses as well. And Hamza can speak about that. Then always make sure that you meet the specific entry requirements for the course. So of course, if you have a background in English literature, and if you want to do law, but you can't do it because the entry requirements wouldn't let you. So it's really important to check that. Then they require proof of finance. This happens slightly later after you make an application and before you take up your offer, there's generally requirement to show that you're able to fund it. And this can be either through a scholarship or self-funded, which means that if you have a scholarship, you'll provide a scholarship letter. If the university gives you a scholarship, then there'll be some letter to attest that as well. And otherwise, if you're self-funded, then I think you have to give some details to show that you're able to pay for the degree and your living costs. But again, this happens slightly later. Then competence in English. Universities require you to take English language tests. So this could be the TOEFL or the IELTS. I think in yesterday's session, we discussed English language tests and when you should take them, why you should take them, how to ask for waivers. So if you didn't attend the session, I'd suggest you have a look at the recording of yesterday's session, which will be uploaded on our YouTube channel to get a sense of navigating the whole English language tests. And then finally, skill-based test scores, so GRE, GMAT. If the course, there are a lot of courses for which it is required that you have a GRE or a GMAT, and in fact a specific score as well. So you'll have to check whether that university requires that. Next slide. Again, very quickly, just what all would you need for a university application? You will need an SOP or a personal statement, the prompts for which are usually written on the course website. you'll need a CV. Again, how long, what information is required is usually mentioned on the university website. Now, some universities actually don't require you to submit a CV, but require you to enter the information on the portal. So Oxford has recently changed it, and now you don't have to upload a CV, but on the application portal, they'll give you fields to fill about your experience and skills. Then writing samples or essays. So many courses require you to give a writing sample that demonstrates your research skill and sort of is a way of for them to determine whether you'd be able to take up the sort of rigorous academic research that the master's requires. Then academic qualification documents, so your official degree transcripts, your English language test scores, your GRE GMAT scores, these are all that you'll have to provide at the time of your application. And then LORs, of course, so recommendation letters from professors, mentors, supervisors, again, depending on what is the requirement of the university. Sometimes universities very strictly say that they only want academic reference letters, which means these have to be people who've taught and graded you in your university formally. If it doesn't say that, then there's more liberty. And if you have work experience, you can ask somebody you worked with to also write your LOR. And I think we're doing sessions on some of these independently throughout the course of our workshop series. So again, you'll get a lot more information on them. Next, yeah, I think I will hand it over to Hamza now.
Okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. In case you forgot it, I'm currently doing my master's in advanced computer science here at the University of Oxford. This is a 12-month program, and I'm doing a bit of research, and also I have taught courses as well. So feel free to ask me about that later on. But just to give you an overview of what STEM master's programs entail, they usually encompass engineering subjects, physics, chemistry, the natural sciences, mathematics, and computer science. Some programs might be cross-listed, for instance, economics in the case where there's a huge mathematical component, but then you should check those programs individually. Depending on which country or which location you're applying to, these might have some different impacts on what you're looking for in the future, maybe jobs, maybe PhD applications, maybe your visa status. So just make sure you actually look at the program you're doing and see which category it comes under. Generally, these programs require you to have a strong background in the subject area you're applying to. The reason is because these are short programs. These are maximum maybe 1 to 2 years. They build up usually on what you've already studied. So they're technically advanced, and usually the stuff that they cover requires prerequisites. So most programs, when you look up their requirements on the websites, will have some very strong academic condition on what you have studied before this, what you should have studied before this. So be sure to check that out. And that requirement is usually rigorous. Make sure that if you're still in the process of studying, try to meet those requirements. Some programs may require specific courses, even if they don't explicitly mention it. For instance, if you're applying for a CS master's at a good university, they probably won't mention it, but they'll require you to have some experience with algorithms or that sort of thing previously, just giving an example, right? So even if you're applying from a related field, like for instance, if you've done your bachelor's in physics or mathematics or engineering, if you're trying to go for a master's in CS, they'll probably be looking for that. Now, this varies. This is just an example, but just be careful about their academic requirements. These guys are actually quite strict about those, especially in the UK. Now, these programs will have different priorities based on where you're applying to. Some will try to target jobs. So those programs will be built around like placing you at a good job, for instance. These will be mostly in engineering, computer science, and they usually require you to have like good internships or previous work experience in some capacity. Or even if that's not the case, it requires that you have some research experience or that sort of thing. Most of these programs do. So make sure you align your values with those programs. And that's important because when you come to writing your SOP, then it becomes important that you know, okay, this is what the program is looking for, and this is why I may be a good match for them. You need to get that compatibility correct when you're applying to them. Secondly, most of these master's programs will have a thesis or a research component within them, and that research component doesn't just have to be academic research, it can be industrial research as well. This means that these programs will be partnering up with their industrial with some industries or some companies, and they will give them problems that you have to solve as part of your internship or your research project at the end of the academic year. Again, this varies from program to program, and it's entirely possible that you will run across some programs, let's say in physics or chemistry, especially in the natural sciences, where there will be no research component, and in fact, you will only be expected to just do taught courses throughout the course of your program. But generally, an average mix of these courses constitutes of like some taught modules, some practical work, and then some research components. So that's the general gist of it. And then the research part usually comes in the form of a thesis or a project component. Again, that depends on what exactly the program is that you're going for. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so I've talked a bit about the requirements. What I particularly want to focus on are three things: your CV, your statement of purpose, and your letters of recommendation. Now, if you're applying for programs that are a bit rigorous or that lead up to some research component, especially at good universities, then these are like really crucial. And broadly, what you want is that you need to have some professional and your experiences attest to the fact that you actually know the stuff that you're expected to know when you're coming for this master's program. What that means is, in terms of your CV, you should ideally have some research experience, or that can come in the form of your final year project, or maybe an internship you did in some lab at your university, or maybe some work you did for a company. That's one way to get that. Just giving examples, we can go into more detail. Next comes your statement of purpose. A bad statement of purpose is when you start off with, okay, I wanted to be a physicist since I was 6 years old. That's not what they're looking for. What they're looking for is that you actually like the subject, which means that you can talk about the stuff you've done regarding it. So if you've taken undergraduate courses, you should be able to talk about them and tell them exactly what your experience in that subject area is, why you want to pursue it further, and more importantly, that you can give a direction for yourself, that you can able to express the fact that, okay, I want to work in this particular area, or I have this particular interest that I want to establish, and why, if I'm coming to this university, I will be able to achieve that. Again, make sure you're focused when writing your statement of purpose. There should be a coherent story which always indicates that, okay, you actually have the background that makes you eligible for this master's or this degree program, and that if you were to come here, you would actually be able to pursue that. So make sure you tie whatever you're saying up with tangible experiences. Lastly, the letters of recommendation are what actually give all this previous stuff their seal, their stamp of authority. So the way to get them usually is to talk to your professors, someplace you worked at, or maybe a lab you worked at, that sort of thing, and try to get them to write your letters of recommendation. Remember, it's always best, since you're applying to an academic institution, it's always better for you to get these letters from good academics. So that should be your first priority. The reason for that is the people who are going to be reading these applications are usually university professors. So when they read a recommendation, they look at who's writing it. And for them, legitimacy comes when it's a known professor or it's someone who's conducting research. So maybe try to prioritize academic people in your application. Again, if you're going for something like software engineering that requires maybe industrial experience, that can change. Maybe it's more beneficial to talk to whoever you're working with. But that's the general overview of it. As far as GPA goes, every university has a separate requirement, but one thing that you'll notice that's different is they won't write a GPA requirement, they write a first class honors degree 2-1. Now, these are the UK's grading systems. You can read up about them, but the important thing is they can be converted into a GPA system. So just make sure you're meeting that criteria, and you're choosing universities based on the fact that you can meet those criteria. These guys are pretty strict about it, so they have that like cutoff system where if you're not meeting it, they probably won't consider your application unless there's some exceptional circumstances. So make sure you look at the requirements before you apply. Some universities require standardized tests for subjects. You can look at which ones require that. As far as my program went, it did not require any GRE or any additional subject test. But again, that may vary for your programs. You can just look that up, and these are pretty standardized, so I don't need to go into particular detail about it. Just some advice about getting research experience or industry experience. If you're working or if you're still an undergraduate, what you can do to try to get these academic references is, in Pakistan, you can try to approach a lab at a good institute, maybe that you know of, maybe in your city, and try to see if you can work during the summer or maybe for a few weeks during your semester if they're in the same city. In my experience, so I did my undergrad at LUMS. professors were open to taking students, especially from other institutions as well. So there were a lot of people from other universities who were working in the labs. That's good because that helps you get those professors' recommendations and also get some research experience, which is important, especially when you're applying for a master's program that expects that people who come in will either go for a PhD or they'll have some research background. So it helps. So that's just a tip I have in this department. And make sure your other experiences when you're writing your CV for this, make sure that your experiences indicate that you're a good fit for this program. For instance, if you're applying for a master's in let's say CS, then you want to talk about maybe some internship you did where there was some aspect of computation, or maybe you solved a problem that wasn't inherently computational for the company using a computational method. That's just an example. The point is to show that your experiences should indicate a fit for this particular program. So try to adapt your CV for the particular programs you're applying to. And I've talked about the letters of recommendation, as well as the SOP. Just make sure the SOP aligns with the goals of the program as well and whatever they're expecting of their graduates to have. Don't just write it thinking, okay, this is my dream. I really like it. I want to tell someone that I like it. And the most important rule when writing your SOP is show, not tell. So if you're trying to express that you want to do physics, for instance, show that you have done stuff that indicates that you're keen about physics. That can come through in various ways, but just keep that principle in mind. But I think that's a large holistic overview of writing a STEM application writing a STEM application. We can move ahead with the other programs. If you have any particular questions, you can ask towards the end. Also, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. Okay, we can go ahead, I think.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm Akhter. Currently, I'm doing my master's in international law and human rights at Akademi University, Finland. And today I will give you a brief overview regarding the applications if you want to pursue your master in
Hi,
computer
Sana,
science.
sorry, could you just move your microphone a bit closer? It's a bit hard to hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, thank you.
Hello everyone. I'm Akhter, and currently I'm doing my master in international law and human rights at Akademi University, Finland. And today I'll give you a brief overview regarding the master applications in program of humanities. And, it's really important when you done your undergrad, you need to do something different, right? For example, if you want to do your master, the first really important thing you choose what course actually you want to do and what sort of interest you have in different subjects. For instance, in humanities, there are a lot of options like literature, history, philosophy, arts, and culture studies. And every program have their different own eligibility criteria. The first thing, firstly you want to choose your program, the first thing is that you to do some homework on it. Actually, regarding their eligibility criteria, their research areas, and they're usually what sort of requirements they want the program actually need. These are the basic things which one person must think before applying or researching on different type of programs if they want to pursue their masters. Because some programs are taught based and some programs are research based program. So it's very important to see your interest in which program you want to go, because there are certain programs which are 1 year program and there are other programs which are 2 years programs. If I give my example, currently I'm doing a master that is a 2 years program. It's a combination of research work and taught programs as well. So both modules are in this programs. Next slide, please. Okay, what's the important thing? What things are important for humanities application? The first thing is the important is your CV, because it's in your CV you have to mention certain things, because every country has their different requirements regarding this. For example, in Europe, they basically required a Europe pass style or CV structure. You have to mention certain things, not too much length they require. You just need, if you want to pursue, for example, if you want to do the master in law, there are certain things you need to mention that are relevant to this. And the other thing is your statement of purpose. That is very much important because you need to mention the things which, according to that program, that align to your interest. And then there is your letter of recommendation. That is most probably it's better that you should go for your letter of recommendation from your academic supervisor. And there is another thing that is your writing samples, and there are some other programs who requires basically the standardized test for that particular programs. In my case, my universities, they just need certain writing samples according to my program, and certain universities, they require the test. For instance, if someone wants to do something regarding in their want to pursue some program regarding psychology, so there is certain test they actually take, and after that they give you certain the things, how can you go for your admissions, all stuff. And then your SOP is very important regarding this, because in your SOPs, there are certain things you have to mention. For example, if you want to go to the human rights program, and then there must be something you have done in your internships, in your background practice experience on that particular issue. So that is very important, because your SOP played a very important role. Around 70% of your scholarships, your funding, that is on your good SOPs. So your SOP must be aligned to your interest and your research goal. And you must also mention then why you have chosen this particular programs, because you have a certain experience regarding the matters. So it would be helpful for you to choose that certain programs, and it also helps the universities to give you the scholarship by reading your a good SOP. So SOP plays a very important role. You must focus on that particular thing, because some university have their limit for this. They require only within 500 words. So before applying, you should think about most rigorously, or what can I say, that you should think very carefully what you have actually want to write in your SOP, because that is really important. And then your letter of recommendation, if, for example, if some student, they don't want to study after the undergrad program, they want to work firstly, and after that, they want to go for their master program. So it's better that they firstly seek their letter of recommendation from their academic professor, because that your professor knows much better than your uh, employer. So it's better firstly get or approach to your academic professor for the letter of recommendation. And then your CV, that must be aligned, because if you have written your SOP regarding your interest, regarding your program, so your CV must be aligned to that. For example, if you want to pursue your master in human rights, that there must be some experience, there must be some places you have worked which actually work for the human rights. So your SOP and your CV, that must be aligned with that specific program. So it would give you the best chance to, get the scholarship or get the admission in some different very good universities. Next slide, please. Next program is the social sciences master, because it's also include a multiple discipline: law, sociology, political science, economics, anthropologies. Basically, these programs focus on the human behavior, social structure, and societal issues. Similarly, the most important here is that it's give you both theoretical knowledge and some practical research skills. Also need, to analyze some complex social phenomena, because if you're doing the pursuing the master, there is a certain requirement that you have to do some practical work as well. And there is some other program as well, like economics, you have to do something, the same things. And these programs basically, highlight some contemporary social issues, or something that is related to your policy development or your human rights issues. So these are really important for that. And sometimes some organizations also work on that. Like if I talk about the human rights, so in Pakistan, there are certain organizations, they are working on this specific issue. And if you graduated, if you opt any program regarding these courses, then you can work in these areas as well. So these program also emphasis on some research skills. Both it can be qualitative or it can be quantitative, and the students are basically trained to collect and analyze the data, and it also help them to get the good result through this program. So these social sciences programs have different time length, and different universities have different criteria for that. For instance, in UK and in Australia, the program length is 1 year, but in Europe, the program length is basically 2 years, and it's a combination of your research and your taught programs. So it's depend basically on the country requirements or the university's requirements. Next slide, please. So very important thing is what other things are important regarding the social sciences application. So as I mentioned earlier, the requirement is your bachelor degree must be that relevant subjects. For instance, if you want to pursue your master in economics, that your undergrad must be in economics or the interdisciplinary field. Or if you want to pursue your LLM or master in law, so your undergrad must be in law. So these things are really requirement. But some universities, they also they give you the admission on the basis that you have taken certain subject as a minor in your undergrad degree. And similar to the humanities, there are few things which are very important. The first one is your CV that must be aligned according to your interest. For instance, if you pursue your master in economics, that must show something that you have done some work on that particular area. Or if you want to pursue your master in law or human rights, that must be something, your internship, your professional experience that you have mentioned in your CV, that must be aligned to that. And then your statement of purpose, that is very important, and that must be show your interest, your previous work. If you pursue something, for instance, if you want to do a master in commercial law, then your CV must, or your SOP must show that you have a certain experience or expertise in that particular area, or you have worked in that area. Then the other thing which is very important, that is your letter of recommendation, because only your academic professors know your writing abilities, your critical analysis abilities. So it's better that you should get your letter of recommendation from your professor. And certain university also required some writing samples. If, for example, if you give, I want to mention that there are certain universities in America, for instance, NYU, they particularly ask a specific question, and that specific question have a word limit, and you have to answer that question, and that is basically the thing that give you, admission in that particular field. And some university also have some criteria regarding, they have some tests, for instance, GRE, but in my course, there is no such requirement. There's just the university took an interview for me regarding that, because I have a previous experience in that particular field. So they just need that. But some university have the particular requirement, and they heavily focus on quantitative, things like economics or psychologies, where, strong performance on the quantity section is highly valued. So they need the GRE scores. So your the most important, I think I mentioned that your SOP that must be aligned to your interest, and your CV also highlight your academic experience, your research, and all that. So these things are very important for that. And if you want to any further question, you can ask me in chat box. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ayesha here. I completed my master's in financial economics from University of Oxford back in 2019. And since then have been working in the financial services industry, initially in Pakistan, and now have more recently moved to the Middle East. So I'll be taking you through this section on interdisciplinary masters, mostly by way of examples, because I presume there's a lot of overlap with the preceding sections, but just to elucidate how different interdisciplinary, degrees could be, I think it's better if I give you an example of my own degree and maybe one other one. So typically these masters, as evident by the name, they entail combining theoretical foundations and research techniques from 2 or more disciplines to address complex real-life problems that really can't be viewed from an insular lens. So if I give example of my own degree, which was financial economics, so it was taught by faculties from both the Said Business School at Oxford and also the Department of Economics. So I basically studied econometric techniques and used them to price financial assets such as stocks, bonds, financial derivatives. I also got to learn how economic agents such as households and firms were pivotal in, their decision-making rather was pivotal in preventing or averting financial crises that we then subsequently got to experience over the past few decades. Similarly, there is this other degree offered at Oxford called MSc Law and Finance. It's a combined offering between Said Business School and the Department of Law. So financial economics, you might understand that finance and economics are kind of allied fields. So having an interdisciplinary sort of combined degree does make intuitive sense. But law and finance, initially, when you just glanced at it, you will maybe, prompted to think that how these two seemingly disparate disciplines are linked. But the way the degree at Oxford is structured, it's basically telling you how regulatory landscape is shaped across public and private financial markets, how these seemingly complex transactions that you come across by way of, mergers and acquisitions or complex restructurings, how they progress from a legal perspective. So you understand these real life situations from lens of 2 disciplines. It's an interplay between both, essentially. And there's a lot of, so the way these programs are structured, there's a lot of flexibility involved. To expand on that, so if you look at the MSc Law and Finance degree at Oxford, there are a certain number of set core courses, 3 or 4 at max, combination of both. So maybe 2 are from law department, 2 are offered from the finance one. And then you have this option of taking up 5 elective courses. And it's really up to you how you want to shape your degree. So for instance, if you are thinking about a career in investment banking after graduation, you could choose to take electives, those 4 or 5 that you have during the course of your degree. You could take them from the finance discipline. Alternatively, if you want to opt for a career as a corporate lawyer, you could choose more courses from the law discipline. So these programs, in my experience, are pretty, flexible. Even when it comes to financial economics, the degree that I personally pursued. So we, again, had 4 core courses that were equally split between economics and finance. And then I had a choice of, taking up 5 electives that could be from the Department of Economics or could entirely be from Said Business School. It was up to me. And typically these courses also have, a capstone project or a thesis towards the end. And that's more pertinent for people who want to keep that option of a DPhil afterwards, DPhil PhD that is, open afterwards. So for instance, in my program, MSc Financial Economics that is, it wasn't mandatory for you to do a dissertation, but you had an option to do that. And it could help you with a subsequent DPhil application in finance. So some of my classmates did opt for a dissertation. I personally didn't because I didn't want to pursue a career in academia, but you have flexibility in that regard. Can you move to the next slide, please? Thanks. So typically, these interdisciplinary fields, programs rather, they require that you have experience, academic background in one of the 2 fields. So for instance, in my case, it was in financial economics, that is. It wasn't mandatory that you had a background in finance, but it was recommended that you had one in economics because that's a more theoretically rigorous, academic discipline. Similarly, for MSc Law and Finance that's offered by Oxford, it's essentially mandatory that you have an undergraduate degree of some form in law. So finance is fine if you don't have background in that for the law and finance program, but you do necessarily need academic, background in law. So it depends from program to program. Again, you should refer to the program site for more details. But typically, it's recommended or it's mandatory that you have experience in one of the two disciplines that you're opting for. Then the key elements of application are essentially the same as have been stated previously. In my experience, writing samples, especially for my degree in, like I'm saying, law and finance that I was more acquainted to, they weren't required. But for some degrees, such as master's in public policy, they would be required. So it really depends on the program you're opting for. And then GRE is also required in some cases. So for instance, my degree, it was essentially mandatory for you to either undertake GRE or GMAT. It was an offering by the business school. So they required that you either opt for one of these two tests. And then they had this really stringent criteria for scores that you got across the quantitative and verbal elements of the test. So financial economics is a very content-intensive degree. It's very mathematically, rigorous degree. So the university essentially required that you got at least a 90% percentile in either of the two tests, GRE or GMAT, whichever one you took, in the quantitative element of the test. For verbal section, the requirement was a bit less stringent. It was around 80 to 85%, but for quant, they require 90% threshold or more. So that's something that you need to look into depending on the program that you're choosing for yourself. The SOP here, I think, would basically distinguishes this SOP from the ones that have been, tapped into before during the course of this call is the fact that you really need to, explain why you are opting for this is interdisciplinary masters. So let me just explain that. So when I was applying to Oxford for this MSc Financial Economics degree, I was also applying to the master's program at Cambridge, which is Masters in Finance. Then I was also applying to, London School of Economics programs, simple Masters in Finance program. So for the Oxford application, I really needed to explain why I would choose financial economics degree over a pure finance degree or a pure economics degree. What is it about this interdisciplinary program that would help me specifically in my career aspirations? Why won't I choose a plain finance degree over this? Similarly, for someone who is considering to do an MSc in law and finance, they would have to explain why are they opting for that instead of just a plain LLM degree and maybe taking a few modules on corporate law. Why is it that they are choosing to do MSc Law and Finance? Why an interdisciplinary program at the outset? And the thing that I've noticed the most over the past 5 years since I've been asked to help on certain applications is that during in the SOPs, a lot of people basically focus on why a particular program suits their career aspirations. They don't focus on another element, which is, in my view, is equally important, if not more so, which is what would you bring to the program? Okay, you're tapping into this element that, okay, this program, it's like structured in so and so way. I think it will help me, get to this point in my career. But what are you essentially offering to them? Why should they have you, on their program? And this is particularly important for any business school degree. So if you're looking for an MBA or, the program that I did, MSc Financial Economics, they do have interviews during the course of application. I had a direct admit, so I didn't give one, but my peers did give interviews. And the panelists basically included one professor who was asking them questions around, theoretical aspects about, finance and economics, trying to see whether they have the necessary background to get acquainted with the rigor of the program. And then there was this person from careers department of Said Business School who wanted to see whether they would be a good fit. Okay, so you essentially need to convey that element through your interview if you are, able to progress to that stage. But you also need to include that in your SOP, particularly so if, you're opting for a degree that's offered partly by any business school out there. And then basically letter of recommendations. Again, my advice would be the same, that depending on how the program is structured, usually in my experience, they focus more on academic references because these are taught programs, so they just want to see whether your academic background is suited to the program at hand. But again, if it's been a long time since you graduated from your undergrad or from your previous degree, or if the program has sort of a practical element to it, specifically my degree, so financial economics was a bit of a practitioner sort of a degree, so then they would accept professional letter of references as well. But I would recommend that you look at the site to understand the specifics of your degree, the program that you are essentially interested in. Writing sample, again, I think the other panelists would be better, able to answer this question. I personally didn't have to write one. My application involved CV, SOP, letter of recommendations. But I understand that writing samples are a crucial component of other applications, particularly so for, I believe, masters in public policy, where you are expected to write a policy brief for about, I think, 1,000 words or so, to demonstrate your leadership abilities and to address any issue of importance in your local or regional sphere. So with that, I believe we'll head to the Q&A session.
Hi, yes, thank you so much, Sana, Aisha, and Hamza, for this very, very comprehensive presentation. And thank you. I see some of you are already answering the questions in the chat, so that's very helpful. I'm also aware that we're running over time, so if any of you have to leave, please do let me know. Meanwhile, I'll just start going over some of the questions in the chat, and if anybody has any questions that they want to ask themselves, please raise your hands now. Okay, so there's somebody asking that if it's okay if they have a 2-year BSc. So basically they have a 2+2 masters, they have a 2-year BSc followed by a 2-year MBA. So would that be a problem? If any of you have any experiences with that, please do share.
So I don't have an experience with that, but I would recommend that if there's any way for you to preemptively reach out to the admissions office with this query of yours, that's the first thing that you need to do. So for instance, like I mentioned, my business school, they have webinars throughout the course of the academic year. They also hold, Q&A sessions. So I think those people would be best placed to, answer specifics around such idiosyncrasies.
That makes sense. Thank you, Aisha. There's also a couple of questions on letters of recommendations. So I know you all have been over that, but there's a specific question about whether people should use the references coming from, for instance, professors and head of departments, or if they should prioritize references from, for instance, consultants that they've worked with who belong to Oxford. So there are a lot of questions in other sessions as well about what do you prioritize? Do you prioritize the name, the institution where the reference is coming from, or do you prioritize the kind and the amount of time that you've worked with the person? So if you have any further advice on letters of recommendations, that would be, I think, helpful for our audience.
So I could try to answer that. So the first thing you want to keep in mind when trying to find the answer to this question is, what do you want the recommendations to tell the admissions committee about you? So it's meant to be something nice. So you want to come off in the best possible light. So let me give you two scenarios. There's a potential of having a recommendation from like a really big professor that says you're an average student in his class versus a recommendation from a professor who's not as good, who says that you were, let's say, the star student in their class. You're going to want to choose the one that puts you in the best light. Now, if you're applying for an academic, for a very theoretical or maybe an academic master's program, they don't care about like many other stuff things they've done. They're also a bit cautious about like non-academic references because they recognize that, you know, people can just ask someone they already know to write them a good recommendation letter. So your first, obviously you can build a hierarchy out of this. A good professor who knows you well and can say good things about you, that's obviously the best thing you want to choose. Now, if you're in the scenario where you can get, let's say, an equally good recommendation from a professor and an equally good recommendation from somebody who's working outside, you want to look at your program and what aligns best with that. If you're applying for, let's say, a master's in economics, maybe if the consultant works at a big company, maybe if they have a background, if the company has a background, maybe they work with government projects, you know, and you're interested in macroeconomics, and maybe you worked on a project with them, then maybe the recommendation makes sense. They'll be able to highlight specific things that show that this person is a good fit for them. But if it's, let's say, it's a management consultancy that works with something that's really not related to your program, and your professor is somebody who's an expert in economics, if they can say that you were very interested in the subject, and maybe, let's say, you did good research work with them, then that makes a little more sense for your program. The general outline is just make sure whoever's writing is writing the best they can about you. And number two, what they're writing and what their own background most closely aligns with what you're applying for. So that should be how you prioritize who you're asking for recommendations from. Hope that answers it.
Yep, and I'll just add this one thing, at least that's what I experienced when I was applying to, that you ideally want to go towards someone who is approachable and who actually puts in the effort to understand what kind of program you're applying to. I've seen a lot of, professors who write amazing references, but they aren't any different from what they write for others, right? Like they don't put a lot of thought into, you as a person specifically and the kind of program that you're applying to and what it would be prioritizing. So, like I also did my undergrad from LUMS. I came across this professor who had the standard template that they use for all their students. So you don't want to go for, such sources ideally. So yeah, that would be my advice, that, go for people who are actually, willing to put in effort for you, trying to understand what your program is all about and trying to comment about, like how they think you would be well suited to that particular program and or degree.
Thanks, guys. Once again, if anybody has any questions that they want to ask, please feel free to raise your hand and ask. Otherwise, I'll just continue going over some of the remaining questions in the chat. So there's a question on writing samples, whether you need to write them on specific topics. So I know that depends partly on your course and university. Sometimes they have specific requirements, sometimes they don't. But if you have any further advice, particularly related to your fields, please feel free to share that as well. Okay, I think we'll move on. So there's another question in the chat. Is it possible to get a scholarship for someone with a humble educational background, limited skills, hand-on experience, and research expertise? So if any of you could answer that, and also maybe share ways that you can build your profile while you're applying or before you apply.
I'll try. I just have a few things to say to this, and then you guys can also pitch in. So the first thing is, the thing that's better, if it's okay if you're from a background that's maybe, that's not as educationally, you might say, elite as some other people, But even with that background, it's better to have an application that has more skills than it currently has, more experience than it currently has, and more research experience than it currently has. So if you have time until you apply, just make sure you can do like some of these things. Now, and then I've talked about this before as well. If you don't have access to good recommendations currently, maybe spend a year working in a lab at a big university. As far as I know, in Pakistan, professors are very keen to accept students who to work after their graduation who are maybe not from that place. So that always helps. Secondly, maybe you guys can talk about this more, but there are, especially for Pakistan, there are some scholarships that particularly try to target specific geographical regions or people from backgrounds which are not as conventional in terms of education. So I think the OPP runs a few scholarships for that, but these guys will talk about that more. But there's also a few more at Oxford that I know of. I'm forgetting the name, but you can look it up. It's especially for Pakistani students. Also at some other universities in the UK, there are some. And if you're applying for PhDs, then usually if you have funding, universities are more inclined to take you up. So there are a lot of HEC sponsored scholarships for people from Pakistan, and many people from non-conventional educational backgrounds also get these. So, but that's only for a PhD. You guys can add more if you have something.
Honestly, I would say that you guys are very lucky to have OPP at this stage. When I was applying back in 2018, we just had two Pakistani specific scholarships. One was Wikinoon, which I got eventually, and then another one was Sir Anwar Pervez. So you guys already have a lot more options than I did back then. But also to add on to Hamza's points, you should do a bit more research on external scholarships that would fit in with your specific requirements, right? So for instance, when I was applying, there was this woman in finance scholarship that was being offered, and it basically targeted women are underrepresented in the financial services industry anyway, so it was targeting women in general, and then it wanted to focus on women who came from disadvantaged backgrounds. So you'll have to do a bit more research. I'll see if I have that list for business school courses in particular, and I'll share it with you guys. But yeah, external scholarships, there are a lot of them out there that you might want to leverage. They aren't specific to Oxford per se, but that's certainly something you can look into.
I also want to add in that point that there are certain scholarship. Firstly, you have to check the HEC website. I think there is a Commonwealth shared scholarship as well, or some other scholarship where HEC also helping or funding the students. And if we see some particular external scholarships, so you can also check the different universities of different countries. They have multiple scholarship. As I'm currently studying in Finland, so I'm on a scholarship. Finland had very good options for the scholarship. They also have a Finnish scholarship, Finnish government scholarship, and universities have their own scholarship list. So many Pakistani students are currently, doing their master from the Finland. And other countries also have a many scholarship. Like UK have different scholarship, but firstly you have to research and see which scholarship is aligned with your interest. Thank you.
Yeah, just one more small thing. Don't just look at university scholarships. So I know this about the UK. Programs have their own scholarships as well. So for instance, when I was looking into computer science applications, I know some universities in London have scholarships within the Department of Computer Science for people who are from a particular background. And sometimes these do not show up when you're just looking at university scholarships. So just make sure you go to your program website and also check in if they have any specific funding for the program.
Thank you, guys. Wakar, please go ahead. You can unmute yourself and ask.
Hello everyone, thanks for putting this happen. My questions to Aisha. I have a background in economics. I did my master's from Government College University Lahore in economics, but I have an experience of health economics, research experience in health economics. So this year I am applying to taught master course at University of Oxford. The first time that course is offering MSc in Health Services Improvement and Evaluation. So There are certain external and internal scholarships they are offering. So one of the scholarship is the Field Hoffman Scholarship and Leadership. So my question is, how can I relate my economics degree research experience in health economics with the uh, leadership requirement? Thank you.
There's a lot to unpack here, and I particularly relate to this a lot because these funding bodies are not very generous when it comes to scholarships for any finance or economic related field. At least that's what I experienced back in the day. So you really have to focus on, if your current academic background or professional background, it does not demonstrate, leadership in some form or shape, you have to focus on what you want to accomplish, right? So for instance, just to give my example, when I was writing these scholarship applications, um, I had, professional experiences, internships at corporate banking, firms. And when you first hear about it, you're like, okay, but where's the leadership element to it? Where's, the element of you contributing to any form of public good, which is something that a scholarship body would expect you to demonstrate in some form or shape. But what I did was I focused on, what I wanted to do in the future. So I talked about impact investing. I talked about the fact that I have this skill set in finance. I've been studying, different courses. I've worked across different organizations, and how those experiences have led me to come to this conclusion that I need to do finance in a more inclusive and socially responsible manner. So by impact investing, what you mean is you basically focus on investing in companies that do some form of good in terms of, environmental sustainability, or being more inclusive in terms of women representation, or just employing people from more, economically disadvantaged backgrounds. So that's how I went about it. Obviously, everyone would have a different story. Like, this is not a footprint that I would ask you guys to emulate. It should be genuine what you're, demonstrating in your SOP or by way of your letter of references. But you just need to be a bit more innovative about how you want to, pitch your story. If currently you haven't done something that in your mind would demonstrate your leadership capabilities, maybe, think about doing like an internship that would, or, try to frame your scholarship application in a way that you focus on the future. Okay, I haven't done this so far, but I want to do this in the future, and this is how I think I would do that. So that would be my advice. Maybe someone else would like to pitch in.
Yeah, I'll just add one small thing. Sometimes people don't consider this as like a valid option, but sometimes it's also like if you think you don't have a good profile for funding, it's strategically a good decision to take a year off and then apply. And many people do this with like a specific job, or maybe they're working on a very specific project. So if you have something like that in mind, and this is in general, and that's like impactful, and you think your application does not have something that maybe meets scholarship criteria, then it could strategically also be a good decision to maybe do something that aligns with you, that works for you, that's good for you for a year, and that also gives you this sort of experience. Obviously, that's not what I'm suggesting that you should necessarily do, but sometimes people do not consider it to be a valid alternative, whereas it can actually be a good strategic decision. And when I was applying for my undergrad at LUMS, it was a common decision for a lot of people to not apply that year, do something that they already knew they were going to do, and then apply. And it works in a lot of cases. So just consider that.
Yep, and a lot of my friends, specifically from economics department, they focused on these, research positions with organizations like SERP. They did some short-term consultancies with World Bank, and with other sort of boutique consultancies in economic realm. And that's something that they leveraged in their applications. So if by any chance you're, still a bit maybe not applying it immediately and are thinking about augmenting your profile, I would suggest looking into these opportunities.
Okay, thank you guys. I think I'll just take one more question. So this question is specifically on LLM, so maybe Sana can help answer, but I think this is a common question for all fields, so all of you can pitch in if you want. So the question basically is, if you could suggest a country that is best for LLM based on career opportunities, fee structures, etc. So maybe you can just shed some light on how you made this decision or what were factors that you considered, which I think we've already covered in the session, but just a quick recap would be helpful.
Okay, thank you so much for asking this question. For LLM, I would say because mostly we have seen in from Pakistan, mostly people go for 1 year LLM, and that is from UK, and definitely the fee structure is very high if you expect very prestigious universities, all that. But with regard to the career, you have to do very hard work regarding these things. Firstly, you have to study that relevant subject. If you have interest in commercial law, then you always try to get admission in that relevant program, and then after that you will see what opportunities you have for that specific country or specific discipline. And then there are other countries as well. For example, if you have want to pursue your LLM in America, definitely they have different eligibility criteria, but still the problem is financial. But for that, firstly, you have to see what sort of funding you can get before getting the admission. And the thing is same for opportunities perspective. You still need to work on that. Obviously, every country has their different requirement, and sometimes if you find some program that have some the work experience element, then definitely it will help you for some good work opportunities as well. And if you want some scholarship aspects are like very easily. So I would say in Europe, this is a good option, but still they didn't mention that specific degree as a LLM. They just mention it master degree in specific whatever field you want to opt. For example, if I'm doing a master in international law and human rights, that degree is master MDB program in international law and human rights. That is a specialization. So it will help you in future if you want to go to academia, or you want to work in some NGOs or some certain type of organization. But still the question is that how much effort you put in, and the program which you are choosing, what are actually the scope of that program. This is basically the thing. For that you need to work on that. And I think every country have their different requirements, so it's basically up to you which you think that this suits you. Because if we see that for specific LLM, I think the best option is United Kingdom. If you get the opportunity or funding or anything, so I think you should go for that.
All right, I think with that, we can wrap up. Thank you so much, Sana, Hamza, and Ayesha for joining us today, for sharing all your experiences and advices. To our audience, thank you for joining as well. Please note that the recording will be made available on our YouTube channel very soon. And we hope to see you next week for the third and fourth workshop, which I believe are on PhD applications and scholarships. So a lot of you had a lot of questions on scholarships. So I hope that we'll see you all in our sessions on the next weekend. Thank you, everyone.